Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football Dill. The Apple Cup going down Saturday afternoon. Washington State heading on the road to play the Washington Huskies. And quite frankly, both of these programs impressing me throughout the first 2 weeks of the season. Starting with Washington State, John Mateer is an absolute electric factory, an extremely fun offense to watch for Washington State. And then you look at the Washington Huskies, and Dill, kind of what we expected from Will Rogers, right? High completion percentage, getting the ball out quick to his playmakers in space, letting Giles Jackson do the rest. This is kind of how we expected it to go. Now, I think both of these teams will be tested in different ways than they were the first 2 weeks of the season. Really excited to get into this one. I'll start with this, really hard game to get a read on for me. Fired up to get into it now. Before we do, and as always, especially for a rivalry game like this, let it fly in the comments section, whether you agree with the boys, whether you disagree. Dill, I don't know if we're necessarily going to agree on this one either. So let it fly in the comments section. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And Dill, let's start with this Jedd Fisch Washington Huskies offense going up against this Washington State defense.
I mean, it's kind of looks the way you would expect it to look. The ball's
Yeah.
coming out quickly. Will Rogers, that's kind of what I think he needs to do, just given that they're obviously still building both sides of the trenches, but certainly that offensive line doesn't feel like a strength of this Washington team. But again, when you have a Jedd Fisch calling the plays and Will Rogers in a set of receivers that he feels comfortable with, they have been making it work. Obviously, because the ball gets out, it gets out on time. In their wide receivers, they make plays with it in their hands.
That's probably the biggest question you have in this football game is Washington hasn't really been tested in the trenches yet. One of the questions I have is Washington State a team that can test them on the offensive line? That's kind of to be determined. Now, you look at Washington's numbers, and I get it, it's not necessarily playing a Big Ten schedule just yet, but 30 points per game, that's 42nd in the country. They'll 9.2 yards per play, number 2 in the country. This Washington team just doesn't take negative plays, right? You look at Will Rogers, ball out quick, they're efficient, they're running the football extremely well. And we kind of said this, right? Like Jedd Fisch, you think, all right, we're going to throw the football all around the yard, which is what Washington is doing. That the passing game looks like how Jedd Fisch operated it back at Arizona. Jonah Coleman, absolute dude. True freshman Adam Mohammed going back in, and I heard a bunch of buzz out of this kid kind of through spring ball and fall camp. From what you've seen during this kid's first 2 games as a freshman running back, he's going to be special. You got a lot of different weapons, and Dill, we kind of said it. Like, what better wide receiver to kind of fit into this Jedd Fisch offense than my guy Giles Jackson?
Yeah, he's been around forever. Obviously, started at Michigan, had a decent career there. It felt like then coming over to Washington, it did feel like, again, they had some really good wide receivers. So he did get pushed aside, it felt like, for a while. But I think you're right, especially given how Washington needs to play that ball coming out quickly and all those type of things. He really does fit that offense perfect. What I'm frankly looking for is you've seen Washington just kind of outflank teams, get the ball to the perimeter, do it quickly. I don't think they've played a defense that's as fast in terms of overall team speed as this Washington State team. So again, I think Washington's limited in their ability to pound on teams. I just don't think they have the offensive linemen in that program yet. That to me will be the test is can they play that style of football and do it really effectively in that kind of one-dimensional way they've been doing it, where, yeah, they're running the ball, but it's not really running the ball inside. Everything's getting to the perimeter. Everything's getting there quickly. I'm really interested to see if this Washington State team that I feel like is fast enough can keep up.
Washington State has some real team speed in the back end. That's something that impressed me. You look at the 2 keys for Washington State. One, pass rush. Like, again, I don't think Washington has seen a defensive line as talented as Washington State yet. I'm not saying Washington State's the Georgia Bulldogs up front, but it's probably going to be the best defensive front they've seen all season so far. So that's where my eyeballs are first. And then secondly, you got to tackle in space. Dill, you look at Washington, 377 yards after the catch through the first 2 weeks. Like, it is very clear how Washington wants this offense to look. If you want to beat Washington, you're going to have to tackle their playmakers like Giles Jackson in space. Can Washington State do that? That's the second question to this football game. Now, flipping sides here, Washington State's offense is wild to watch. They can attack you in a lot of different ways. John Mateer is just kind of one of those gritty college football
Yeah, he's
quarterbacks.
not like they don't have the most refined passing game in the world I've ever seen. But again, he figures out a way to march them down the field. Obviously, a great, great athlete and a really good, I think, instincts for running the ball, but
Yes.
also sneaky. I mean, he makes the throws he's supposed to make for the most part. It's just, again, is it as rhythmic as Washington, where it looks like as pretty? Probably not. But they've been marching the ball up and down the field on people.
It's such a fascinating offense because one, I kind of like going into the season. All right, John Mateer, kind of a I don't know if I'd say like wildcat quarterback, but it's going to be a very run heavy offense, which we've seen. They run the ball 70% of their offensive plays. That's top 10 in the country. They've done it effectively, 6.5 yards per carry. That's number 8 in the country. So we know Washington State wants to run the football. But Dill, one of the things that kind of stood out to me is one, John Mateer can rip that ball down the field, and they ask him to do so. We're not going to throw it that much, but when we do throw, average depth to target at 11.6 yards, they're averaging 23 yards per completion. So we're going to run the football, but we are going to try to hit the deep play. Hey, look, we know we're not going to go 80% completion percentage like Will Rogers, but when we do throw, we're going to hit explosive plays. That's what they've done so far. I think the big question for Washington is one, can you stop the run and force this Washington State offense into those third and long, obvious passing situations where that is not where
that is one thing I think you love about Washington. The one position that I think on defense they've really shined at is that linebacker spot. I mean, Tuilaputa, I don't think I got that. I'm definitely that name right. But he's a really good linebacker. He's making a ton of plays for them. He flies around, and that to me will be kind of the question because is his speed able to kind of keep up with what John Mateer's been doing? Because that's how I feel like Washington State's been hurting teams is letting him get loose in the backfield.
And one of the things I'm looking for outside of the linebacker play stopping the run, can Washington's defensive backs, which is another bright spot, I personally think, in their defense. Like, I think they got some dudes in the back end. Can they hold up on islands? Because how I would go about stopping this Washington State team is I'd put my safeties in the box, try to stop the run, make John Mateer really be a two-dimensional quarterback. I kind of try, and Washington State's got some guys, right? Chris Hudson, Kyle Williams, they can work vertically down the field. If you're Washington trusting your defensive backs with that matchup, making John Mateer kind of almost beg him to push the ball down the field and see if your defensive backs can hold up. Because if you can take the running game out of Washington State, which we haven't really seen teams be able to do yet throughout the first 2 games, I think that's probably how you get to this Washington State offense.
It's like you're right. Washington does have legitimately very good cornerbacks. I mean,
Yes.
Bryce, those guys can really, really play. Obviously, again, similar to their offensive side of the ball, their defensive line appears very small for a Big Ten unit. I mean,
Yeah,
they're
100%.
athletes, and I certainly think that helps with a guy like John Mateer, who does really hurt teams scrambling. So maybe that like lack of size and maybe leaning more towards the athleticism may help them a little bit. But that'll be something I'm looking for is can Washington State that I actually thought they were pretty good up front against the Texas Tech team that's defensive line. I thought it was going to be pretty decent. I mean, they handled that unit pretty well. I thought they ran the ball. I thought they could be physical with them at the point of the attack. That's one thing I'll be looking for because Washington hasn't played a team that I think really can go try to beat on them.
Yeah, it's by far your biggest concern, and I'm kind of with you. Like, you turn on the film for Washington, they do seem, and it's going to get better under Jedd Fisch. He's just kind of like, this is kind of what he's working with year one, and trust me, Jedd Fisch done a great job kind of working around that. Dill, let's get to the pick here. 5.5 points. The spread opened at 4.5. It's up to 5. Washington State on the road. Who you got?
Yeah, I don't get this one, frankly. I think Washington State's a very good football team. I still think Jake Dickert's done a really, really good job there.
Yes.
I think they're athletic. I think they can keep up with this Washington team. And I just don't think Washington's had the time to build their lines of scrimmage. I mean, you saw how much turnover they had. Even if Kalen DeBoer stayed, you saw like they didn't really recruit that level. They didn't recruit at the level I think you need to build those both sides of the trenches up in the way I think they're going to have to moving forward under Jedd Fisch. So I kind of think Washington State doesn't give up that much athletically on the boundary to this Washington team. And I just think they're more developed. They've been able to build those trenches up on both sides of the ball. I really think Washington, this should probably be a pick 'em to me, frankly, and not a plus 5.
I'm going Washington. For a couple of different reasons. One, I think that Texas Tech game is a little bit it doesn't necessarily paint a real good picture. Like, Texas Tech outgained Washington State by almost 70 yards, but they turned the ball over 4 times. I have question marks about this Washington State defense. And I think overall, I am going to go with the quarterback that I trust and the offense that I trust more. I look at Washington State and say, one, it's a really fun offense to watch. I do think it's rather one dimensional. And I'm going to go with the offense that I think can hurt you in a multitude of different ways. Will Rogers, obviously a proven winner at the quarterback position. And I love Jedd Fisch as a head coach. 5 points is a lot, but I think it's going to be rocking in Washington. So I'm going to take Washington in the points. I don't feel great about it. I think this game is going to be much better than a lot of people assume. I feel like now that Washington State's not a quote unquote Power 4 program, they kind of treat them like a Group of 5 team. This is still kind of a Power 4 team in terms of talent and what I've seen on the football field from them. Hell, they just beat Texas Tech outright by over 20 points. I'm going to go, was my math right? Yeah, 21-point victory. I'm going to go Washington. Don't feel great about it. Going to be a very, very fun game. I'm kind of on the rule right now. Anytime John Mateer's out playing quarterback, I'm going to try to have eyeballs on that football game because that kid's a blast to watch. Fired up for this one. We'll cut it there. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.